the struggle begins. In the heart of a vibrant African city where the golden sun kissed corrugated rooftops and the air was thick with the scent of roasted maize and diesel, lived a girl named Nia. With eyes as deep as the ocean and a mind hungry for greatness, she walked the cracked sidewalks of her neighborhood every morning, school bag slung across one shoulder and dreams weighing heavily on the other. Nia was the kind of girl who didn't wait for life to hand her blessings, she chased them. Born to hardworking parents in a modest two-bedroom home tucked behind a dusty soccer field, she had always stood out. Her father, a quiet man with calloused hands, drove a taxi from dawn until the city lights dimmed. Her mother sold vegetables at the market, her voice rising above the noise like a drumbeat of resilience. They were not rich, not even close, but their home was built on hope, discipline, and the belief that education was the key to breaking generational chains. From the time Nia was barely able to hold a pencil, she had dreamed of becoming a medical doctor. Not just to wear the white coat and earn respect, but because she had seen too many lives stolen by treatable illnesses in her community. She remembered the night her little brother coughed so violently it echoed through the concrete walls. The clinic was closed. They had no car. Her mother prayed until sunrise. That night stayed with her, it burned into her like a mission she had no choice but to fulfill. And so, Nia studied. She studied when the lights went out, using candles or the faint glow of her mother's old phone. She studied when her friends played in the alleyway or shared laughs over roasted groundnuts. While the world danced, Nia fought for a future she believed she could build with her own hands. But something strange was happening. No matter how hard she tried, how many hours she read or how many practice exams she took, her results never reflected her effort. Semester after semester, she found herself barely scraping by. In mathematics, she saw a D. In biology, her favorite subject, a painful, humiliating F. Her teachers, who once praised her, now shook their heads with disappointment. "You need to work harder," they said, not knowing she was already pushing herself to the edge of exhaustion. Nia began to question herself. Was she cursed? Was she simply not smart enough? Had her dreams outgrown her capacity? The whispers started. In the school corridor, at the back of the classroom. She's all talk, no results. You'd think she'd be smart with how serious she looks. Maybe her brain is just not meant for this. Those words stung more than the red marks on her papers. They buried themselves into her confidence like thorns. She started eating less, sleeping less. Her vibrant energy turned dull, like a radio playing on low volume. Her once confident walk became hesitant, her laughter rare. Even her best friend, Lila, didn't know how to help anymore. "Maybe you need a break," Lila offered gently. But Nia shook her head. She couldn't afford a break, not when her entire future was on the line. Her family noticed the change. Her mother would watch her quietly at dinner, noticing the way her daughter barely touched her food, the way her shoulders slumped. Her father offered silent support, sometimes slipping her extra taxi money with a quick nod. But no one could carry this burden for Nia. It was hers alone, and it was growing heavier by the day. And then came the final blow. At the end of the academic year, Nia received her report card. Her hands trembled as she opened it, hoping, praying for a miracle. But instead, the words screamed failure. She had not only failed multiple subjects, she was being asked to repeat the year. Her legs gave out beneath her. She sat in the school courtyard, staring at the paper, the noise of the world fading into nothing. Her eyes welled with tears that refused to fall, as if even they were too exhausted to try anymore. Around her, other students celebrated. Laughter and joy filled the air like cruel reminders of everything she had lost. That night, Nia lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her room, once decorated with sticky notes of motivation and posters of powerful women in lab coats, felt like a prison. She didn't know who she was anymore. Was she still the girl with a dream? Or was she just another name on the growing list of those who tried and failed? And worse, she felt completely alone. No one truly understood what it meant to pour every drop of yourself into something, only to watch it crumble in your hands again and again. But somewhere deep within her, buried beneath the pain and self-doubt, a faint ember still burned. This wasn't the end. At least, not yet. A friend's concern. The days that followed Nia's crushing academic results were hollow. The sun still rose, traffic still hummed, and life continued around her, but inside, she felt like she was moving through fog. Even the vibrant colors of the city, the women in bold patterned dresses, the smell of jollof rice wafting from street vendors, the hustle and banter of minibus drivers, felt muted. Her world had dimmed, and she didn't know how to bring the light back. She barely left her room, save for brief walks to the kitchen or the bathroom. Her textbooks remained untouched on her desk, their pages still open to lessons she once devoured with hope. Days blended into nights. She stopped replying to messages and ignored the knock at the gate when classmates came calling. But there was one person who refused to leave her alone, Ada. Ada had been Nia's friend since they were 5 years old. They had shared mangoes under the old neem tree by their primary school, held hands through every exam, and whispered their dreams into the night sky during sleepovers. Where Nia was quiet, thoughtful, and focused, Ada was fire, outspoken, emotional, and fiercely loyal. They were like two sides of the same coin. Ada had watched her friend's slow unraveling with increasing concern. At first, she had respected Nia's space, hoping she just needed a little time. But after a week of unanswered texts and a disturbing call from one of their teachers who hinted that Nia had missed a required academic counseling session, Ada had had enough. She marched to Nia's home one Saturday afternoon, the heat rising off the asphalt and determination in her step. When Nia's mother opened the door, looking tired and concerned, Ada didn't wait for permission. She went straight to Nia's room, knocking once before letting herself in. Nia was curled on her mattress, her hair in a messy bun, face pale from days indoors. Her room smelled faintly of old food and silence. "You look like you've been swallowed by a thundercloud," Ada said softly, closing the door behind her. Nia didn't answer. Ada sat beside her and placed a gentle hand on her back. "You can't stay like this, Nia. I'm worried about you." "I failed, Ada," Nia whispered, her voice dry and cracking. "I tried so hard and it didn't matter. Maybe this just isn't meant for me." Ada's jaw clenched. "Don't you dare say that. You're the most hardworking person I know. You don't just give up because things are hard." "It's not just hard," Nia said, sitting up slowly. "It's like something's fighting me. I study and study, but my mind goes blank during exams. I forget the simplest things. And it's not just school, everything in my life is falling apart. Even my health's been off lately." Ada nodded slowly, as if waiting for that admission. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping into a whisper. "Nia, I've been thinking about this a lot. What if this isn't just physical?" Nia blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if there's something spiritual going on? Something unseen. I know it sounds strange, but this doesn't feel normal. You've done everything right. You've worked hard. This feels like an attack." Nia recoiled slightly. "Ada, don't start." But Ada didn't back down. "Listen to me. I know you don't believe in these things the way I do, but just hear me out. I've seen things. My cousin went through something similar. Brilliant girl, full of life, then suddenly everything started crumbling. It wasn't until she went to this small church out near Casual Road that things started changing." Nia sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. "I'm not saying I don't believe, it's just I don't know, Ada. It feels too abstract. Too desperate. Ada finished for her. Nia, you are desperate. And that's okay. You don't have to understand it right now. You just need to be open. There was a long silence between them. I've heard about that church, Ada continued. It's not one of those flashy ones with loudspeakers and promises of miracles for money. It's quiet. The pastor's different. People go there for serious deliverance and healing. I've been once with my aunt. The presence there, it's real. You feel it. You don't even have to believe for it to work. Nia looked at her, skeptical but also curious. There had been strange dreams lately, shadows chasing her, voices calling her name in her sleep. The feeling of being watched when she studied late into the night. Her hands trembling for no reason. The heavy weight on her chest that no doctor could explain. Could all of that really be more than just stress? What if I go and nothing changes? She asked quietly. Then at least you know you tried everything, Ada said. And I'll be with you. Every step. That night, Nia lay awake thinking about Ada's words. Her rational mind pushed back. She believed in science, in logic. But logic had not saved her. It hadn't explained the inexplicable. It hadn't eased her pain. She thought about her little brother's narrow escape, her parents' endless sacrifices, and the haunting fear that she was cursed to fail. By dawn, she had made a decision. Okay, she texted Ada. Let's go. Ada responded in seconds. Meet me Sunday morning. I'll take you. That Sunday, Nia dressed simply. A plain blouse, long skirt, and the sense that she was stepping into the unknown. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from a strange anticipation. The streets were quiet as she walked to meet Ada, the city not yet fully awake. Ada was waiting by the roadside in her mother's old sedan, a bottle of water and a Bible in her lap. You ready? Ada asked. Nia looked at the rising sun, then back at her friend. For the first time in weeks, she felt the tiniest flicker of hope. Yeah, she said. Let's go find out what's really going on. As the car rumbled down the winding road toward the church on the outskirts of the city, Nia didn't know that this journey would change her life forever. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The revelation. The church didn't look like much from the outside. It sat at the edge of a dusty road, partially hidden behind tall grass and crooked trees, its weathered white walls marked with time and humidity. A faded sign hung above the entrance, the Rock of Refuge Ministries. No flashing lights. No booming speakers. Just silence, and a strange stillness that pressed gently against Nia's chest as she stepped out of the car. This is it, she asked, her voice low. Ada nodded. Yeah. It doesn't look like much, but just wait. As they walked up the path, Nia tried to manage her expectations and her skepticism. Her mother had raised her in a home where God was respected but never dramatized. Prayer was private, quiet. Not this unfamiliar territory with strangers who claimed to cast out spirits and heal the unseen. It made her nervous, though she wouldn't admit it out loud. Inside, the church was cool and dimly lit, with wooden pews arranged in tight rows and a simple wooden cross fixed to the far wall. A few early attendees sat scattered across the room, heads bowed, whispering in prayer. There was no choir, no pulpit showmanship. Just a quiet hum of expectancy. They took their seats near the back. Nia kept her eyes down, uncomfortable with the watchful silence of the room. She could feel the weight of her own doubt pressing heavily on her chest. She didn't belong here, did she? This wasn't her world. These weren't her answers. But when the pastor entered, everything changed. He was a tall, slim man with skin like burnished bronze and kind, piercing eyes that seemed to look through the very soul. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply walked to the front, took a deep breath, and began to speak in a calm, commanding voice. There are some battles that are not of flesh and blood, he said. Some afflictions are not failures of intelligence, or weakness, or effort. Some chains are spiritual. Nia's heart skipped. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. As if he already knew. As if he was speaking to her. She tried to look away, but his eyes swept the congregation slowly, and when they landed on her, she felt it. A shiver. A subtle pulse in the air. Her breath caught in her throat. Some of you, he continued, have been running hard but getting nowhere. Studying without understanding. Working without reward. Crying out, and getting no answer. Not because you're cursed by man, but because something deeper, something unseen, is resisting your destiny. Nia swallowed hard. Ada placed a hand gently on hers. Then came the moment of prayer. The pastor invited anyone who needed clarity or healing to come forward. Nia froze. Her instinct was to hide, to shrink into her seat and pretend she wasn't there. But before she could decide, Ada was already helping her up. Nia, Ada whispered. It's time. She walked down the aisle like someone in a dream, heart thudding, palms sweating. A small group had already gathered at the front, some weeping softly, others with eyes shut tightly in prayer. When Nia reached the front, the pastor gently placed a hand on her head and closed his eyes. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there, silent. Listen. Then he said, quietly, you are under attack. Nia's eyes widened. There is a veil of confusion around your mind, the pastor continued, his voice still calm but now firm. A spiritual burden passed through your bloodline, something ancient, something that doesn't want you to rise. Every time you try, it pulls you back. You are not lazy. You are not a failure. You are bound. A sound escaped Nia's lips, half gasp, half sob. It was as if he had reached into her chest and pulled out the very thoughts she'd buried deepest. You've been dreaming, he said. Dark places. Shadows chasing you. Sleepless nights. You feel watched when you study. You forget what you know the moment you need it. Yes, Nia whispered. Yes, how do you know? He opened his eyes. Because it's spiritual. And it's time to fight back. Nia staggered slightly, overwhelmed. Her doubt was still there, clawing at the edges of her reason, but it was being drowned by something more powerful, truth. Not just the pastor's words, but the recognition she felt in them. He was describing her life. Her exact struggle. And deep inside, something was shifting. After the service, she and Ada sat in the small counseling room behind the church, where the pastor joined them again. He handed Nia a glass of water and spoke gently now, like a father. This is not about superstition, he said. This is about deliverance. You are called to greatness, but you are being resisted in the spirit. We must break that chain. Nia looked down. So what now? You begin the sessions. 3 days of prayer and fasting. Intense spiritual cleansing. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Nia hesitated. The idea of fasting, praying with strangers, being vulnerable, it all made her feel exposed. What if she embarrassed herself? What if nothing changed? But then she remembered her report card. The ache in her mother's eyes. The nights of crying into her pillow, asking why. And she realized she had nothing left to lose. I'll do it, she said softly. I want to be free. Ada squeezed her hand proudly. The pastor smiled. Good. We start tomorrow. As they drove home, the late afternoon sun bathing the city in orange and gold, Nia felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not certainty. Not even peace. But the faint stirrings of a fight she was finally ready to face. The battle intensifies. The sun barely peeked over the horizon when Nia rose from her bed. The city was still quiet, holding its breath before the chaos of another day began. For the first time in weeks, she felt a different kind of energy, not of dread, but of quiet focus. Today marked the beginning of her deliverance journey. The instructions from the church were simple but strict: 3 days of fasting, intense prayer, morning and evening sessions with the pastor, and complete spiritual focus. No social media. No idle conversations. Just her Bible, and her God. Nia took it seriously. She spent the morning in prayer, guided by a small devotional Ada had given her. The verses felt different now, alive, weighty. She read them slowly, letting each word settle in her spirit. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Her heart beat a little faster. It was no longer just a verse, it was her reality. Ada was with her every step of the way. She showed up with light soups, checked in constantly, and even prayed with her over the phone late into the night. This isn't just your fight, she reminded Nia. I'm with you. Always. By the second day, Nia had begun to feel lighter. Clearer. But that night, things took a dark turn. Her dreams returned. Only this time, they were worse. She was standing in a dark forest, barefoot and shivering. Strange whispers filled the air, coming from nowhere and everywhere. Something was following her, eyes glowing red in the shadows. Her feet were stuck in thick mud, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move. The whispers turned to screams, and just before the thing reached her, she woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat, heart hammering in her chest. She told Ada about the dream the next morning. Ada didn't flinch. That means it's working. The spirits resisting you are unsettled. Keep going. So Nia did. By the third day, she was scheduled to attend the most crucial session, what the pastor had called the breaking point. It would involve intense prayers, laying on of hands, and direct confrontation with whatever spiritual forces were oppressing her. Nia dressed quietly, tying her headscarf and slipping on her sandals. She felt nervous but focused, bracing herself for whatever might come. Ada texted, "I'll meet you there. You're almost through. Be strong." But Nia never made it to the church. Just 2 streets away from the entrance, as she crossed an intersection near a row of street vendors, a car came flying around the bend. Tires screeched. Horns blared. Nia turned just in time to see a blur of silver rushing toward her. The impact never came. A stranger, a tall, broad man, yanked her back with one arm just in time. The car missed her by inches, crashing into a pile of fruit baskets instead. People screamed. Vendors rushed to gather their goods. The driver jumped out, apologizing profusely, claiming his brakes had failed. Nia stood frozen on the sidewalk, trembling. She should have been hit. She should have died. The stranger who had pulled her to safety disappeared into the crowd before she could thank him. One moment he was there, the next, gone. Ada arrived seconds later, her eyes wide with panic. "I saw it." "Nia, oh my God, are you okay?" Nia nodded slowly, her mind racing. I don't know what just happened." Ada didn't hesitate. "I do. That was an attack." Nia looked at her. "You think it was connected?" "Of course it was. The enemy is trying to stop you from reaching freedom. You're too close. And he knows it." Back at the church, the pastor met them at the door, eyes sharp with understanding. He listened quietly as they recounted the near accident. Then he nodded, as if confirming something he already suspected. "This is how it works," he said. "Spiritual chains don't break quietly. They fight back." But fear not, God always finishes what he starts. The session proceeded as planned, but now Nia entered it with new eyes. She had tasted the reality of the battle. The accident wasn't just a warning, it was proof. Proof that this was real. That something wanted to end her before she reached her destiny. During the prayers, she didn't hold back. She cried. Shouted. She spoke words of warfare she didn't know she had inside her. Her whole body shook with a force she couldn't explain. The room was thick with spiritual intensity, others were praying around her, but in that moment, it felt like heaven and hell were fighting over her soul. And then, suddenly, peace. A deep, unshakable peace. As if something had lifted from her chest, something dark and heavy that had been sitting there for years. She felt light. Clean. Awake. The pastor placed his hand over her head and whispered, "It is done." Nia collapsed to her knees, not from exhaustion, but from release. The tears came freely now, not from fear or confusion, but from gratitude. From the understanding that she had survived something invisible, yet deadly. That she had been saved, not just from a car accident, but from spiritual chains that had tried to destroy her mind, her future, and her purpose. Later, outside the church, as the sky turned lavender and dusk wrapped around the city like a blanket, Nia turned to Ada and whispered, "I was supposed to die today." "But you didn't," Ada said. "Because you're called to live." Nia nodded, her eyes shining. The battle had intensified. Deliverance. The sun had not yet risen when Nia arrived at the Rock of Refuge Ministries. The air was thick with early morning humidity, and a still silence blanketed the small church. It was the final day. The final session. The one the pastor had called the deliverance. Nia walked slowly, each step deliberate. She wasn't afraid anymore, not exactly, but she was aware that she stood at the edge of something immense. Something irreversible. Deep inside, she knew, after today, she would never be the same. The church was dimly lit, just a few candles burning at the altar. Several prayer warriors had gathered, men and women with steady gazes and calloused knees from years of intercession. They welcomed her not with smiles, but with quiet nods of readiness. This wasn't a celebration. It was a war. The pastor stood at the front, dressed simply, a Bible in one hand and a bottle of anointing oil in the other. When Nia approached, he looked at her with the kind of gaze that sees through skin and bone, straight into the soul. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I think so," Nia whispered. He shook his head gently. "Don't think." "No." She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and nodded. "I'm ready." They began with worship, low, powerful songs that stirred the air like thunder rolling in the distance. The voices around her weren't just singing, they were declaring. Calling down power. And then the prayers began. The pastor moved methodically, calling out specific spirits, spirits of confusion, delay, stagnation, fear, failure. With every name he spoke, Nia felt something inside her react. At first, it was subtle, a tightening in her chest, a sudden chill crawling down her back. Then, things escalated. She began to tremble. Her body shook involuntarily, and her breathing grew erratic. Sweat broke across her brow, and a strange pressure built up behind her eyes, as if something inside her didn't want to be exposed. "Don't fight it," the pastor said firmly. "Let it come to the light." Nia doubled over, clutching her stomach. The pressure now was unbearable, like her insides were twisting. Her hands clawed at the floor as she gasped for air, her voice cracking with pain. And then she screamed, not a scream of fear, but of deep, spiritual agony. Something was coming loose. The room burst into louder prayer. The prayer warriors surrounded her, calling on heaven, rebuking the darkness that had bound her for so long. Suddenly, Nia began to cough. Violent, even coughs that racked her entire body. She dropped to all fours, gagging, her throat burning. She felt like she was choking on something solid, something foreign. And then it happened. A long, black mass expelled from her mouth, a small serpent, sleek and still moving, writhing as it hit the floor. Gasps filled the room. One of the women swiftly covered it with a cloth, others rushing to dispose of it. But Nia collapsed onto her back, tears streaming down her cheeks. Not from fear. From freedom. The pastor knelt beside her, anointing her forehead. "The stronghold is broken," he said, voice thick with conviction. "The serpent of affliction has been cast out. You are free." Nia could barely speak, but her soul knew it was true. The heaviness she had carried for years, gone. The pressure on her chest, lifted. Her thoughts, clear. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. Like her spirit had been washed in something holy and sacred. As if God Himself had reached down and pulled her out of the pit. The rest of the session bled into gentle prayers and soft worship, her body recovering while her spirit soared. When she finally stood, she felt lighter than air. A girl reborn. Outside the church, the morning sun had finally broken over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Nia stood at the doorway, breathing deeply. The air smelled new. Alive. Ada met her outside, tears already rolling down her cheeks. "You did it," she whispered. "You're free." Nia nodded, a faint smile stretching across her face. "I feel like I can breathe again." They walked together in silence, but everything had changed. The weight was gone. The shame, the fear, the confusion, it had all died on the church floor, expelled like poison from her soul. Nia knew her journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges, still be work to do. But now, she had something she never truly possessed before. Freedom. And with it, the unshakable belief that the girl who once thought she was cursed, was actually chosen. A new life. Something had changed. Not just in Nia's spirit, but in her very presence. In the weeks following her deliverance, her life began to shift in quiet but undeniable ways. It didn't happen with dramatic flashes or overnight miracles, but with steady, visible transformation. The kind that only comes after a storm has passed and the sun begins to rise again. The first thing she noticed was her mind. For the first time in years, she could study without confusion. Her thoughts were sharp, her concentration intact. What used to take hours of painful effort now flowed with surprising ease. Concepts clicked. Memory returned. Her hands no longer trembled during exams, and the crushing anxiety that once suffocated her was gone completely. When her results came in, Nia stared at the paper in disbelief. A. B+. A. Tears filled her eyes. She hadn't just passed, she had excelled. Her teachers noticed the difference, too. The once disappointed glances had turned into curious admiration. "You've really turned things around," one said. What changed? Nia only smiled, her heart full. She knew. The chains had been broken. The resistance had been shattered. Her relationships also began to heal. Her mother, once silently burdened by worry, now laughed more freely at the dinner table. Her father, though a man of few words, began calling her Dr. Nia again, just like he used to when she was a little girl. Even her younger brother looked at her with something like pride. And Ada, faithful, loyal Ada, remained by her side. They spent hours talking about life, about the future, about faith. Their bond was stronger than ever. Sisters, not just friends. But it wasn't just about Nia anymore. Word began to spread. Whispers of the girl who was failing everything until something changed. Younger students began approaching her at school. Some shy. Others desperate. "How did you do it?" they'd ask. "What's your secret?" So, Nia began to tell her story. At first, it was small, just a few classmates in the library. Then it grew. A youth meeting. A church gathering. A women's fellowship at the community center. Each time, she stood with quiet confidence, her voice no longer trembling, her eyes no longer shadowed by fear. "I was struggling. Failing. And I didn't know why," she'd begin. "I thought I was cursed to be less. To never rise. But what I learned is that some battles aren't just physical, they are spiritual. And you don't have to fight them alone." She shared it all, the confusion, the fear, the near-death experience, the deliverance, and the peace that followed. People wept. Some found courage. Others found faith. And slowly, Nia became more than a survivor. She became a light. One day, she was invited to speak at a citywide youth event. Hundreds of students gathered in a small stadium, waiting to hear from the girl whose story had inspired whispers across classrooms and churches alike. Dressed simply, Nia stepped onto the platform, looked into the sea of young faces, and took a deep breath. "I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me when I felt like giving up," she said. "You're not alone. You're not broken. And your pain is not the end of your story. There is healing. There is deliverance. There is hope." The crowd was silent, completely still, as her words echoed through the speakers. And then, slowly, hands began to rise. Dozens. Then hundreds. Students asking for prayer. For help. For a chance at their own breakthrough. That night, under the stars, Nia prayed with strangers who had become brothers and sisters in faith. And she realized something beautiful. What had nearly destroyed her had become the very thing God used to uplift others. She was no longer just the girl who failed exams. She was a voice. A vessel. A testimony. Closing thoughts. Nia's story is not just hers, it belongs to everyone who has ever struggled in silence, who has fought invisible battles no one could see. It's a story about faith, yes, but also about perseverance. About refusing to stay buried in shame and rising to ask for help. About finding freedom not just in academic success, but in spiritual peace. If you've ever felt like Nia, confused, exhausted, and ready to quit, know this. You are not alone. Help exists. Healing is possible. And your story isn't over, not by a long shot. Sometimes, the darkest seasons lead to the brightest awakenings. And sometimes, the greatest deliverance begins with the simplest decision. To fight one more time.